I would say that well-being in the legal profession is not anything new. I think that for years and years, people have been wondering about this and thinking about this. Well-being is a continual process of seeking to thrive in each dimension of one's life. And so this is not going to look like, at least in my experience, this doesn't look like it has to be perfect. Also remember or keep in mind that everyone's well-being looks different. So your menu is going to look different than anyone else's menu. And that's cool.
Welcome and thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina and I'll be the moderator for today. Now to kick things off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers, Jill Carnell and Loretta Alexi. Jill Carnell, she, her, is a curious entrepreneur and compassionate disruptor who enjoys convening people, resources, processes, and ideas to bring more ease into our daily lives. Jill studied organizational leadership and supervision at Purdue, earning a Bachelor's of Science degree. And after 2 years working in manufacturing and higher education, she was admitted to law school at Indiana University McKinney School of Law. Jill earned her Doctor of Jurisprudence degree in May 2005 and was licensed to practice in October 2005. Loretta Alexi, she, her, is a lawyer, social worker, and group facilitator dedicated to helping people connect with what lights them up. She loves helping people discover their strengths and learn to align their lives and work with them. Before joining Thought Kitchen, Loretta was deputy director of the Indiana Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. She has worked in the nonprofit world, run her own law practice, and held various positions within the Indiana Office of Court Services. She frequently speaks on well-being in the legal profession. The webinar that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, and once that is complete, Loretta and Jill will be taking questions from the audience, time permitting. So if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to submit them at any time by clicking on that Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen and submitting them there. Now, without further ado, here are Jill and Loretta to discuss what's on your well-being menu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to talk today about what is on your well-being menu. So the things that we will cover today are just a little overview of research on legal professional well-being. We will define well-being because we really love definitions. We'll talk about the 7 dimensions of well-being and then about how you can start to work on building your own well-being menu. Anything you want to add, Jill?
Nope. Great start, right. Loretta.
Do you want to go over the overview of the research, Jill?
Sure. So I would say that well-being in the legal profession is not anything new. I think that for years and years, people have been wondering about this and thinking about this. And in the last, 11 years now, we have, as a profession, taken a little bit more intentional approach, I would say. Loretta, would you agree with that? Intentional?
I would agree.
Approach to gathering some data. So in 2014, the survey of law student well-being, the first one, was put out into the world. And so the first data points came back from that. This was all with regard, or all in coordination with, at the time, the ABA had their commission on well-being in the legal profession. And so then in 2016, the ABA and Hazelden, Betty Ford did a study of lawyer well-being, which was similar, but not exactly the same as student well-being, because of course, law students are different from lawyers. And then took that data from the 2014 study and the 2016 study, and also some recommendations and a whole it's called the Path to Lawyer Wellbeing, put together this report on the Path to Lawyer Wellbeing in 2017. And that was published, I think, in about August of 2017, if I remember that correctly. And in the last, going on 8 years now, this has been sort of like the leading document for everyone who is talking about well-being in the law. And from that task force commission. I don't remember exactly what it was called. The Institute for Wellbeing and Law, or IWIL, has now spun out of that. And so IWIL is continuing the work that was started earlier and that came out of that 2017 report. Then in 2020, the report on stress and resiliency in the US judiciary came out because the 2017 report noted, hey, we've looked at law students, we've looked at lawyers, we should also look at the judiciary. And I want to point out that that data was out in the world, or the survey was out in the world on stress and resiliency before COVID happened. So that was reported in 2020, but that data was from earlier. Then in 2021, there was another report or another study and report called Stress, Drink, Leave that showed the connections between obviously stress, disordered alcohol drinking, and then also how people are leaving the profession. And then a second survey of law student well-being was actually reported in 2021. So it followed up, obviously with a different cohort than 2014, but it is interesting to compare those two studies. And then 2024, the Bloomberg Law Wellbeing Report is out. And then Loretta, one we didn't put on here, but just came out that I'm starting to see is about perfectionism and the effects of perfectionism on the legal profession. And I think that will be also interesting to look at. This is very specific, all of these to America, but there's also this work is going on all over the world. There has been some studies in the UK and Europe. There have been studies that I've seen out of Australia and New Zealand. And so this is like a worldwide movement, if you will. And so I'm very excited about it because I think for me, it says if we're actually collecting data and we're thinking about how that data can inform the work that we are doing on our well-being in the legal profession, all across the legal profession, that this has now become part of the conversation. I think it's not quite as mainstream as other conversations, especially in continuing legal education. But I do think that this is, there's been lots of movement over the past decade or so.
I would agree with that. It's been a huge shift. I started in the lawyer assistant program in 2013, so just prior to any of this research. And there was definitely a feeling at that time that lawyers weren't doing as well, perhaps, as the general population in regards to mental health, substance use disorder, general well-being, but there wasn't a lot of good data. And being able to watch the arc of how much we've normalized talking about it and how many more just how much more research and more services are available and how many more lawyers, judicial officers, and law students are feeling comfortable to take advantage of resources has been really heartening. So I am glad that we have all of this research. So this is just a little overview from the ABA Hazelden Betty Ford research on lawyers in 2015 that was released in 2016. And as you can see, over a third of the lawyers that they surveyed, and they surveyed, I want to say around 12,000 lawyers. Is that right, Jill?
I think so, yeah. And this was
a pretty big sample.
It was specifically in America too, in the United States. Yeah.
Yes. And specifically active attorneys who were employed. So data could be a little skewed because of that, but overall, a pretty high rate of problem drinking, depression, stress, and anxiety. Definitely higher than what we would see in the general population, and really higher than what we might see in other professions. Lawyers ranked in the top 10 in a study of suicide by occupation. So overall, I don't think this was any surprise to people working in the lawyer assistant or well-being arena, but we aren't doing well. Anything you want to add there, Jill?
No.
You want to talk about stress drink leave?
Sure. So this was post-COVID, and you can see the site down at the bottom of the screen if you're interested in this. But I think it was. I don't think there was any huge surprise here. That other than I will say, I think in the earlier study, it appeared that there were more men who were experiencing drinking disorders, alcohol use disorders, and I think that there is evidence now that women are also drinking and are drinking more hazardly than men. Of course, this is considering, a gender binary thing here. So when we're talking about women and men, there's still some work to be done for gender nonconforming and gender and non-binary people. I also think that it is interesting, and this has been proven out in a couple of other studies, that 1 in 4 women are contemplating leaving the legal profession due to mental health problems, burnout, or stress. So that's approximately 25% who responded, where 7% of male attorneys were reporting similar thoughts. And there are a couple of other ABA studies that show that there are differences in the populations of women who are considering leaving. As I recall, Loretta, remind me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this is especially women contemplating leaving the legal profession are especially white women, and that women of color are not considering leaving the legal profession at quite as high of a rate. So there's a lot of intersectionality here. And I just want to point that out that when we're reporting this data, this is like a very rough thumbnail sketch. Like there's obviously plenty of opportunities for anybody who's really interested to dig deeper and to see sort of those crosstabs and to consider what other things are maybe at play here.
Thanks, Jill. So, stress and resiliency in the U.S. judiciary. The report was released in 2020. The data was gathered in 2018, 2019, I want to say. So, again, pre-COVID, and we definitely in informal conversations with judicial officers have seen some additional stressors since COVID. But you can see, a pretty high number, about 70% reported feeling stress over the importance and impact of their decisions and the heavy docket of cases. About 25% reported feelings of apprehension or anxiety. About 20% met at least one criteria for major depressive disorder. You can see some of the stress responses they reported, and also just over 2%, which doesn't sound like a huge number, but when you think about it, I mean, it's not insignificant, reported experiencing thoughts of self-harm or suicide. And these are our judicial officers that are making decisions. They're impacting the lives of litigants. They are impacting, think of what stressors the judiciary are facing today. So I think it's really important for us to acknowledge this and to remember. I think it might be tempting to think, oh, the judicial officers are at the top of the food chain. They've got it all together. They're really vulnerable too. I mean, they are human first. So just a reminder, I think that it's really important for us to remember that and to continue to find ways to help support the judiciary. Anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, I also think that in 2018, 2019, when this data was being collected, it was a different kind of atmosphere in the judiciary. I think even now it's, there's just so much going on with the different branches of government and at the federal level as well as state and local level. And I think it would be great if somebody decided to study this again and we got fresher data. I always love more data. And I also just want to point out, as we're talking about, the students and the lawyers and the judicial officers, we see trends across all three of these cohorts. And we also know, though, that they're experiencing their stress responses in different ways, and they are dealing with those in different ways across these cohorts. So it's interesting to see the similarities and also to note some of the differences. And then finally, before we move on from data, I would love to see, I think we're missing a whole bunch of data about all of the legal support professionals who are part of the legal system. So it's great that we've studied students and lawyers and judicial officers, and there are a whole bunch of other, support staff, everything from paralegals to probation officers, who I think could also benefit from having some data studied with them as well.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on now and talk about the dimensions of well-being. And Jill mentioned earlier the report, The Path to Lawyer Wellbeing, that was released in 2017, which has now grown into the Institute for Wellbeing and Law. And that is where I think really all of the work that's being done on well-being in the legal profession right now stems from. And they identified well-being, and really I think they were very intentional about using the term well-being instead of wellness, and defining it very broadly, and also defining it as not just the absence of illness, but actually thriving. And they set forth 6 dimensions of well-being. We really like environmental well-being, so which we've seen in other models. So we have added that to our work. So if you dive a little deeper into the report, which if you haven't, I would encourage people to look at it. It's a lengthy report, but it is very nicely laid out in chunks for different sectors. So it's a great resource to check out. So we're going to dive in now, unless Jill has anything else to add, and start talking about the dimensions of well-being.
I just really want to come back to this. Well-being is a continual process of seeking to thrive in each dimension of one's life. And so this is not going to look like, at least in my experience, this doesn't look like it has to be perfect, or it's nothing, or it has to be all of them have to be exactly the same, or I'm failing. This is really like, this is a continual practice, just like my legal practice is a continual practice. This is a continual process or practice of seeking to thrive in each of these dimensions. So keep that in mind as we're talking through this, please.
All right. So we are Thought Kitchen, so we lean pretty heavily into the kitchen metaphor, and we like to look at well-being in terms of a menu. So as we go through, we're going to talk about each one of these, and in the handout that you can download, you will have this well-being menu. You will have one of the other tools for snapshot on how your well-being is in the moment. So feel free to take notes or whatever, but also don't panic. You don't need to remember all of it.
And also remember, or keep in mind, that everyone's well-being looks different. So your menu is going to look different than anyone else's menu. And that's cool. And it may change, because you don't always, just like you don't always want to eat the same thing, maybe you change things up. So just play with it a little bit.
All right. So the first one we're going to talk about is environmental well-being. So obviously, environmental well-being includes recognizing your connection with nature, spending time in nature, and caring for the earth. It also includes, and I think it's easy to forget about this, whatever your surroundings are. So your home, your office, and enjoying them and making them comfortable for you, whatever that is. So you can see I've included in here a picture of my home office that I've tried to add some bright colors to, and, make it comfortable. There's usually a dog bed in here with dogs in it. So that's how I tend to my environmental well-being during my workday. Now that might be different than some other people, but I think it's really important to remember that, and also protecting yourself from noise and other environmental hazards. That, I think is a really important one to think of. And when I worked now I have the luxury of working remotely, so I can control that more. But having worked in office buildings where maybe there are fluorescent lights that gave me a headache or gave me eye strain, you know, little things that I could do, like I would turn my overhead lights off and bring in lamps. So there are creative ways that you can make little tweaks to your environment, make things just a little more easeful for you.
The other thing I think is for me, I can remember thinking about like, environments, like a good environment for maybe a child or a good environment for maybe somebody who is an elder or something like that. And I think sometimes like as I was going along, I just sort of forgot about like my environment affects me too as, like just a functioning middle-aged adult. So I think it's really important just to remember like we're spending all this time in these places and how it is around us does affect our well-being.
Absolutely. So we are going to now invite you to share with us. You can scan this QR code to join our polling software, Slido, and let us know. We've shared a little bit about what feeds our environmental well-being, but we would invite you to think about what feeds your environmental well-being and share that through the poll.
And it's anonymous, right, Loretta?
Absolutely. It is anonymous.
And also, no is a complete answer. So if you don't want to share, that's okay too.
Ooh, order.
Mhm.
My desk is not very orderly right now, and it is a little distracting. Favorite pictures on the wall.
Yeah, thank you. Dog in the office, friendly, like colleague. Yeah, thank you.
And I think it will be interesting as we go along because some things will feed more than one aspect of your well-being. So we'll definitely, I think, see some overlap on some of these.
Nature, tranquility, organized environment, plants, clean space. Yeah, we're seeing some themes here. Yeah, thank you.
All right, let's move on to empathetic management. That's awesome.
Temperature and music too. Yeah, thank you.
So we're going to move on now and talk a little bit about physical well-being. And gentle reminder, because when we go into rooms and talk about physical well-being, there might be some shame, there might be some big feelings about, oh, I got to get to the gym, I got to do all these things. All of the going to the gym, running a marathon, all of those might be ways for some people to tend to their physical well-being, but they also don't have to be huge things. Things like remembering to hydrate and fuel your body throughout the day. I think it's about 25% of our calories in a day are spent on executive functions. Really important for lawyers. So remembering, oh, it's time to stop and eat. Keeping, some water. Oh, my water bottle won't show up, but I have a water bottle on my desk. So just remembering those things, getting enough sleep and rest, remembering your regularly scheduled health screenings, and then moving your body however feels good to you. If that means going to the gym, if that means running a 5K, a 10K, a marathon, that's great. But it also might just feel like going out and walking your dog. It might feel like, Jill lives on about 5 acres with lots of trees. She can go out and walk in the woods on her property. So there are a lot of different ways to fuel your physical well-being. Anything else you want to share there, Jill?
Yeah, I think sometimes that this one too can be hard because this is a place where There could be a lot of comparing mind and that sort of thing. And, for me, especially when it is warmer outside and our pool's open, some of my physical well-being is attending to the pool, like actually cleaning the pool and all that kind of stuff. And part of it is also being in the pool. I enjoy water aerobics and water Zumba and water yoga and some other things like that. I live with chronic migraine, so a lot of up, down, all around can be migraine triggering for me. And so, my workouts look different than other people's workouts. And so, just a just a gentle reminder here that we really mean that. However feels good to you, moving your body, like that counts here. And I don't mean counts, but like it's your menu. So you put together what it is that will be supportive to you. And as those feelings of like comparison to others pop up, allow them to be. And also, please don't get derailed because it's not enough or it's not a big enough thing or I'm not training to, scale Everest or whatever. Like whatever your physical well-being looks like here is what is important for you. My physical well-being includes getting my manicure, pedicure, getting my hair done. Like that's very important to me. And so when I am not in a great place and I'm not making those appointments, this starts to affect my well-being. So like think very broadly here.
And my well-being looks really different right now. Part of my physical well-being is working in the yard, and I overdid it a little a few weeks ago. And so part of my physical well-being right now looks like taking it a little easier on some of the things I normally do and going to physical therapy twice a week and doing my daily physical therapy exercises. And I think there was a time in my life when that would have felt like I wasn't doing it right or I wasn't going 100%. I don't need to do that. I got to take care of what I have. So, actually, I am loving physical therapy and I highly recommend it for anyone. So, again, we're going to ask you, what feeds your physical well-being? Ooh, indoor cycling. Yay, yoga. Walks around the neighborhood. What a great variety of things here. All right, awesome.
Thank you.
Let's move on and talk about social well-being. You want to talk about social well-being?
Sure. So,
Okay.
Did you not want me to?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I felt like I kind of like put you on a spot.
No
is a complete answer if you don't want to talk about social well-being.
No, I'm good. Social well-being is, remembering that we are all connected. And so it can look like connecting with friends and family. That picture in the middle of Loretta with a couple of her friends who do this cool thing every Thursday morning and have done for, I don't know, going on 3 or 4 years now. One of her friends was active duty in the Navy and wanted to stay connected. So she said, can we have a Zoom call on Thursdays? And so they've been doing that now, like every Thursday morning for several years now. And so
it's going on 4 years.
Was it going on 4 years?
Back, she's back from her active duty and we just kept doing it.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Social well-being can look like volunteering for an organization that's important to you. It can look like being aware of issues that arise in your community. And it also can mean, because we get this question a lot, like, I am more introverted or sometimes I don't want to be around people. So can my social well-being also look like being, taking some downtime, some alone time? And of course, that can absolutely be recharging alone when you need to. So again, I think that there can be this whole idea that if I'm not going out and being around people and doing specific things, if I'm not going to, the networking time, if I'm not going to cocktail hour, if I'm not going to like whatever the thing is that, I'm not being social, that is not at all like your social well-being, just like all the other dimensions, looks like whatever supports you in helping feel connected to other people.
And I'll also say, because I want to tie this back to some of the answers that I've seen on the prior slides, because as I said, some of these things are going to plug in several places. Animals count. So hanging out with your dogs in your office counts for your social well-being. Or maybe you volunteer to walk dogs at your local animal shelter. Any of those things. I know my dogs are a great resource for me to recharge when I've been out and about and my introvert self is a little overwhelmed. Coming home and cuddling with the dogs can be a great social recharge.
I think we also saw some colleagues on the environmental well-being piece too, like being in the space with colleagues and sharing space with colleagues. So that also, I think, is an example of social well-being when you're connected with your colleagues, and that is supportive.
All right. So let's talk about what feeds your social well-being.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah. More dog cuddle.
Wednesday waffles. Dang.
Okay, we got to start that.
I know. Wednesday waffles sounds amazing.
And I think it's super interesting. In my community, there is a book club that is a silent book club. So we don't discuss, we haven't gone yet, but they don't discuss a book or anything. They just go meet up at the library or someplace with whatever book they're reading and, check in and talk for a few minutes and then they sit and read silently. So there are lots of ways, for introverts to kind of tiptoe into some of the social arenas too.
Fantastic.
I'm going to be thinking about Wednesday waffles all day.
Yeah.
Mm.
I also like going to the movies, so that's a great one. And also hiking with other people. That's one of my things too. So thank you.
Emotional well-being. Do you want to take this one or do you want me to take it?
I can talk about emotional well-being. So
Okay.
emotional well-being, well, first of all, let me just gentle reminder that humans are emotional beings who think rather than thinking beings who experience emotions. So we were facing you all in a room, there would be probably several people who are outwardly unhappy about that. So I get emotional well-being may feel like a yucky thing. And also it is important because we are emotional beings. So accessing and expressing a wide range of emotions falls into this. There's good data from Dr. Brene Brown that says that most people can name 3 emotions. They're sad, they're mad, or they're happy. And there are many more emotions in that. In a book called Atlas of the Heart, she lists 87 different emotional emotions or experiences that we can have. So understanding, what's arising and understanding that these emotions come and go, I think is a very important part of emotional well-being. Also understanding and attending to emotional needs that arise around expressing this wide range of emotions. I know I come from people who, you don't cry, you don't talk about it, you just push it down, all that stuff. That works for a little while. And at some point that generally emotions are going to emotion. So stuff's going to happen. And then also emotional well-being can look like setting and maintaining boundaries. And Loretta and I do a lot of work in this area to help people understand what that is, to get in some reps on that, to start small with like a boundary that is not necessary. It's important, but it's not like high stakes and that sort of thing. This can also be around going to therapy appointments, sometimes couples therapy, that sort of thing falls under emotional well-being. And so, yeah, I think that this is something that, and we know this compared to the data about anxiety and depression and alcohol abuse disorder and other abuse disorders that, the the roots of that are in emotions that can feel like too big to handle. So this is really one of those dimensions. They're all very, very important. And also, like, we have to attend to this. We have to attend to this, even though sometimes, for me at least, it can feel fairly countercultural to say, I'm going to attend to my emotional well-being.
And I think especially for lawyers, and I do see some change now, especially in legal education. But when I went through law school 25 years ago, 26 years ago, we didn't talk about this stuff. And I think there was this, if it wasn't spoken, it was unspoken that, you don't get emotional. Emotions are bad. An emotional lawyer is a bad lawyer. And there's a time and a place for emotions. And like Jill said, they're there, whether we acknowledge them or not. And I mean, I always think of it as, I don't know if anyone else was ever, when they were a kid, if you would like try to hold a beach ball under the water in the pool, it'll stay there for a few minutes, but it's like hard to keep it under there. And eventually it slips and it pops out and it splashes. Um, so that's kind of what our emotions are like. You can try to push them down for a while, but it takes a lot of energy. And at least for me, when I'm not acknowledging them, they're going to come out probably at an inopportune time. And I'm probably going to unleash them on someone who has nothing to do with and no idea what is happening. Anything else?
Thanks, Loretta.
All right. So I would love to hear from you all what feeds your emotional well-being. Dorothy and friends.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're listening to music.
Absolutely. These are great. Thank you.
Quiet time, meditation.
Absolutely.
Ooh, knowing what you can and cannot control. A good cry, journaling. As someone who is definitely raised as we do not cry, I cannot now overstate the therapeutic importance of a good cry.
Yeah, family support. I don't think we said out loud hot yoga. I just wanted to say hot yoga because it's about to go off the screen.
Oh yeah.
Meditation.
Yeah. Physically, ice cream, also one of my favorites.
Yeah, ice cream is a love language for Loretta and I.
Yeah, it is. And I think thinking of hot yoga or other things like that, like letting out some emotions is a real thing. I mean, hot yoga is not my thing, but I do recognize like it is not a made up thing that you can let out some emotion.
Thank you.
Occupational well-being. So this is one that I do want to recognize. For me, like there's a lot of privilege for me that I am able to do work that aligns with my strengths and values, and I haven't always had that ability. So I do want to recognize like there are little steps to take to these things. Um, the picture of Jill and me here sitting in front of the world's largest gavel in Columbus, Ohio, was um, a great a great moment and just I think so representative of I am able now to engage in work that aligns with my strengths and values, and I am so grateful for that. And I also know when I wasn't able to do that, there were ways that I could try to take little steps to move toward that. And I think also integrating work, leisure, and family time in a way that works for you. For some people, they have very strict boundaries about like, I'm at work now, I'm not at work now. I also know some people who mix that really well. I know a lawyer and her husband who own a boat and they spend a lot of time sailing around places on their boat and they work from the boat. That's a great work life integration for them, not necessarily for other people. Um, Having access to opportunities for growth and learning within your profession, continuing education, things like what you're doing today are all things that can feed your occupational well-being. And then, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't say being financially stable. Um, Having work that aligns with your strengths and values is wonderful. And also, you got to pay the bills. So there's a balance to be found there. And one of the things that I do want to talk about here is the little graphic about signature strengths. Some of the work that Jill and I do is centered on the Via Character Strength Survey, which is a free survey anyone can go take. I highly recommend it. And the idea is that there are 24 universal strengths. We all have all of them. Some of them are easier for us to access and bring us energy. Some of them are harder to access or may drain us. And it's really been helpful information for me to be able to look at that, first of all, and instead of looking at, oh, I have strengths and I have weaknesses or deficits, I have all these strengths and I can access them when I need to, but also to be able to look at what are the things that I'm good at that bring me joy. And maybe there are things that I'm good at, but they aren't my work to do right now because they're really draining. So it's anyone who is interested in that, viacharacter.org. It is free. I don't get any compensation from them, but it's been a really useful tool for me, and we use it with a lot of clients. Anything that you want to add there?
I also want to point out we're holding ice cream in that picture. So that was an especially exciting. I mean, we were at an event where we were paid to speak and there was ice cream, which was pretty awesome. And also I think this idea of what's my work to do now, my career has certainly evolved following what I'm curious about, getting interested, having my own lived experience, thinking about what's next, all of that sort of stuff. So like occupational well-being for me looked different 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago than it does now. So my invitation here is just to consider like if things are going great, that's awesome. If things aren't going so great and you're feeling like maybe there's like a shift you want to make, like absolutely it is possible, to figure all of this stuff out. Also, the other thing I want to say is some models of the dimensions of well-being do pull that financial well-being out and add it as a separate dimension, but we do include it here in occupational well-being.
Thanks, Jill.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, all of you out there, what feeds your occupational well-being? Now I'm sitting here thinking, is there a way that ice cream can feed every dimension of
well-being? Yeah, we should probably think about that when we're not in the middle of this. But yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Happy hour routine, baking and cooking, event and chat sessions.
New challenges. Yeah, absolutely. Time off.
Yes. Taking time off. Very important. Controlled chaos. Being treated as a professional. Absolutely.
Lunch with colleagues. Yeah. Some social in that, I would guess. And some physical well-being. Team building. Yeah, nice.
And again, I think y'all can see that there's overlap in some of these. All right. Let's move on. Do you want to talk about intellectual well-being?
Sure. Intellectual well-being is this idea that, like, what am I curious about? What am I interested about learning about or trying or engaging with just for the sake of learning? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to do with, I have to read this because I need it for work. Engaging your curiosity and creativity, pursuing interests outside of your occupation. So I am a traditional rug hooker, and that was something that I love to do. And a couple of times a year, I'll go away for a few days and hang out with other rug hookers, including my mom, who I taught how to hook rugs, which it's usually the other way around. So she likes to tell people that her daughter's a hooker, or she's a hooker, and her daughter taught her how, which she'll be 81 tomorrow. So she thinks that's like hilarious. But that's something that, like, this thing that we do together, like, people, it is a lot of women, and they tend to be older, and some of them are my age, but, like, it's just something fun that we get to do together. I think this is where we can also find people who really enjoy book club. I think this can be something where, like, maybe people are reading different books and have come together, or people are reading books, but there are different kinds of people who are reading books and you might not know them. This can be like, I want to try ballroom dancing, or I want to try to learn how to make sourdough, or I want to go, learn this thing, like, whatever it is. So this is an important part of our well-being. And sometimes we get pushback, especially from lawyers, about this. Like, I'm not creative, I'm not curious anymore. Like, law school killed that for me. I push back. I'm a compassionate disruptor, so I push back on that, because I think that practicing law is one of the most creative things that I've ever done. And I think my curiosity helps me in that. And, like, so what else is going on, or what else do you want, or, like, what else could we do, or like, that sort of thing. So this is an area that I get very excited about, because I am just naturally curious. So, like, I have a many long list of things that I enjoy doing and learning about, and getting to engage with different people on these different topics. So it's intellectual well-being.
And I want to point out, I mean, as someone who was raised thinking I was not creative, from being told early on in art class in elementary school that, my drawing or painting was subpar. Creative expression for me, and I saw some people saying on some of the earlier um, elements of well-being, baking and cooking, that is a huge creative outlet for me. And I didn't look at it that way for a long time. So thinking about some different things, I like to garden. And that is another way that my creativity comes out. So creativity doesn't necessarily mean I'm painting masterpieces, or, I'm writing songs. I mean, it's great. My husband really likes to write songs. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. Um, but he enjoys it. That is his creativity and some of his intellectual well-being. So we've all got creativity in us. Anything else you want to add?
No.
All right. So what is feeding y'all's intellectual well-being right now?
Somebody said they like to go to the movies, and an earlier one, I think that was social well-being.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
movies, television, any of that kind of stuff is also can be intellectual well-being. I learned so much stuff.
Ooh.
Duolingo. Oh my gosh, that's my husband's thing too. He's relearning German. He's on I don't know, 1700 and something day streak. So yeah.
Streak.
Stoicism philosophy. Very interesting. Like to talk. We should do a whole nother, like, tell us what give us 30 seconds about what you're studying.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. Yeah.
Nice trashy
Trashy
novels.
novels. Sweet. Writing classes, reading. Yeah. It was fantastic. Not
Yeah,
reading the news. Yep, that's a boundary. Good for
but
you.
it is.
Good for you. Titrate that information inflow. Discussions with friends,
About my
hobbies.
hobbies.
Yeah. Fantastic.
I spend a lot of time with dogs, and I have learned a lot about animal behavior, which has been some intellectual well-being.
Surprisingly, some K-drama. Very nice. Documentaries. Yep. Yep. Thank you.
Spiritual well-being. Do you want to take this one, or do you want me to take it?
You take it from.
All right. So, spiritual well-being, I think, is another one that people can feel a little touchy about. It might mean things like being part of a church congregation, or praying, or having um, a faith community. It might also be things like identifying and living your values, connecting with something greater than yourself, whatever that is. It might be nature, it might be humanity. I know I've certainly seen yoga and meditation come up in some of the other responses. Um, Definitely things like that, and just experiencing awe. And the photo here is the bottom one is from another speaking engagement that Jill and I had the opportunity to do in Utah, and to be out in the middle of this beautiful outdoors really was an amazing. It really fed my spiritual well-being to be out there. I mean, we live in Indiana where there aren't mountains. So to be out there and to be able to see mountains and nature was just, for me, really a very spiritual experience. Anything you want to add there, Jill?
Yeah, I think the experiencing awe thing can be big or small. So we had a downed red-shouldered hawk rangeling last weekend, and I didn't know what I was. I mean, I knew I was looking at a bird of prey. I didn't know though it was a little guy and all that stuff. And eventually, I was able to actually gather this bird up and put him in a box, and the rehab center guy picked him up, and I learned all kinds of stuff about here's the nest and here's all of this, here's how you can tell, and there's mom, and that's what she's, and she needs help and all this stuff. So it was like intellectual well-being as well, and also it was very much environmental well-being. But like I had this moment of awe of like, I really love these birds and have seen them from far away, and to be like that up close and to hold this bird in my hands for just a moment was really amazing. And I feel like that was a real spiritual event for me. Yeah.
All right. So, what is feeding your spiritual well-being?
Yep, hiking. Same. Ooh, two hikings.
Definitely nature. Ooh, photography. Oh yeah, getting lost in a book. Nightly prayer and gratitude.
Meditation.
Oh
Wow.
yeah, a nice drive and enjoying the scenery. Definitely disconnecting from social media. Another important boundary, I think, especially these days.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, food for thought for all of you. For each of the dimensions, as you're thinking about building your menu, what does support look like and what gets in the way? So, I just encourage you to think about that and think about how you can enlist support, whether that is an accountability partner, um, whatever that looks like. Anything you want to add to that, Jill, before I go on to? So this is just a tool that we like to use just for a snapshot of how your well-being is doing in this moment. And this is in your handout, and you can see there are numbers on those dotted lines, and you can just kind of plot in this moment. How is my intellectual well-being? How is my occupational well-being? And so on. And I want to point out, this is not going to be a perfect circle or septagon. That would be what it would be. Because you're not all of your dimensions of well-being aren't going to be all the same at the same time. And that is not the goal. And sometimes it's really helpful to look and note, oh wow, right now occupational well-being is great. Maybe my physical well-being isn't. Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe, I'm putting in a lot of hours at work right now, so I'm not able to get to the gym. Or maybe you didn't realize it and you realize, oh, I need to put a little more into that. So this is just a snapshot. Don't get too tied up in it, but it can be a really useful tool.
You can also notice growth on this as well. So like if you have set an intention to attend to one of the dimensions more, and then you take, another kind of pulse check with this, I like to look at where like, oh, look, yeah, I went from a, 3 to a 6 or, whatever the growth is there too.
All right. So if you are interested in learning more about building a well-being menu or mindfulness-based well-being, you can scan this QR code to go to our webpage that lays out the mindfulness-based well-being pathway. Also, our website and our social media is on here. And our personal contact information.
And we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, if anything comes up, you can always reach out. Let us know. Thank you.
Right, so,
Thank you both.
Do we have any questions?
Before we dive into questions, I'll just give them a little bit of extra time to submit them. If you do have a question, please feel free to submit it through the Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. And we can now move on to the questions. Looks like we've got a couple. So our first one here is, how can I begin to assess which of the 7 dimensions of well-being I'm currently neglecting or struggling with the most?
Loretta?
I think that last tool is a great place to start and plot that out. It's a great snapshot, and you can take a look at, where are those scores low, maybe where things are a little uneven. And then remember, you don't have to make a huge change overnight. We always like to talk about what's a tiny nudge that you can make just to start to boost that area of your well-being. Anything you want to add, Jill?
Yeah, I think that's good. I also think that asking those questions, what does support look like and what gets in the way, and not at the what gets in the way, a lot of people will say, oh, time, energy, but like stay with that a little longer and ask like maybe like what else and what else, because I think it's just living in the modern world and Western society where time and energy is always going to be at a premium. And so if we stop there, I think we might be missing some like other stuff, like, oh, maybe it's, I need a new pair of shoes and I keep putting that off, or maybe it's, I don't know where to start, or, that sort of thing. Loretta and I do coaching on this as well. So like, if anybody's like, I really just like want to talk to somebody about it, you can always reach out to us and we can help you with that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
And having just bought a new pair of walking shoes, it is very important. And the old walking shoes were doing some damage. So that a little thing can make a huge difference.
Thank you so much. Our next question is, how can I recognize when my occupational well-being is out of balance? And how would you suggest recalibrating without making a drastic career change?
It's a great question.
It is a great question. Loretta, do you have thoughts?
I Yes, I have so many thoughts and I'm trying to focus them. So I have been in this situation, and I think for me, earlier in my well, not earlier in my career, but earlier in my well-being journey for sure, it took for me someone saying to me, "Hey, I think you're not okay." Um, so sometimes maybe checking in with people who know you well to say, what have you noticed about me lately? And then I just think also like really, probably really looking at all of the dimensions of well-being and seeing like, ooh, is something really out of whack? Like, am I spending too much time on my occupational well-being and other things are suffering, or is my occupational well-being a lot lower than the other things? And then really getting, like Jill said, curious about, so what is it and what else and what else? I mean, is it that I'm spending too much time at work, or is it something else? And then I think within that, there are a lot of things. I mean, it took me a long time to leave the job where I was really struggling occupationally. And there were a lot of things I was able to put in place short of doing that. So figuring out what are some boundaries that I can start to put into place to make sure that I'm not working all the time and neglecting the other areas of my well-being. What does support look like? For me, support looked like a couple of colleagues who were support and accountability partners. It also looked like people outside of the organization who were support and accountability partners. But I think there are a lot of tiny steps that you can take once you notice that. And it's going to take getting curious with that.
Yeah, and I would say for me it was, what am I interested in? Like that intellectual curiosity and then the social piece of it. And just like starting just to like, okay, so I'm gonna take a little bit of, on my day off, I'm gonna like look into this thing, or I'm gonna meet with this person, and just starting like, I'm being very clear. I'm not planning to make any huge changes. I am just exploring. I am asking questions and like finding the people that I could do that with who didn't freak out. It was really important as well. So, and there is community to do that. And again, I will say, if you're like, I don't know where to start, like Loretta and I do this kind of work. And so if you need some help, we'd be happy to help you. Just need to let us know.
Awesome. Thank you both. We have two more questions if you all have time for those. Wonderful.
Sure.
The next question is, what are some practical first steps I can take to improve specifically my emotional well-being when I'm in a high pressure legal environment? What would you recommend?
You want to go?
No, you go.
I first of all, I can't stress enough, I think, the importance of having a relationship with a good therapist. Whether that means I go in quarterly for a checkup or a check-in, or I'm going regularly. I mean, I have had a relationship with my therapist now for, I'm going to say, at least 7 or 8 years, and sometimes that looks like I see her every 90 days just to check in and see how things are going. Sometimes it means I'm talking to her every week or every other week. But not waiting until I'm in crisis to find a therapist or to reach out to my therapist has been a huge shift for me, because when I'm already in crisis, it's really hard to dig myself out.
Yeah, I echo that. And then I also would say, first of all, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, I think sometimes when there's this idea of like, I'm feeling emotionally overloaded, like there's something wrong. I don't think that as a culture, we spend enough time like talking about like actual skills to notice and manage emotions when they arise. So that's part of, again, the work that we do. And for me, mindfulness-based well-being has included this idea of how do I start to work with what is arising in the present moment. And a lot of times for me, what's arising in the present moment are emotions. And I'm noticing these things. And so one place that you might start, if you dug at all what we talked about today with the 7 dimensions of well-being, we have put together an introduction to mindfulness-based well-being, which is actually taking the 7 dimensions of well-being and some very basic mindfulness practices. It's freely offered on our website. It's 7 days. You get an email every day and 10 minutes a day. You can have, a little bit of a lesson and you can start to think about this stuff. And then if you want to continue on, there are other things you can do as well. So if you're looking to skill build there, that would be the thing that where I would start. And for me, it was very helpful to start to understand, oh, this isn't just like, just manage it or just be mindful or whatever, but there are actually ways to do that. Just like we laid out today, there's a way to think about each of these dimensions. There's a way to also think about using mindfulness to help manage as all of this arises.
I also want to make sure I put in a plug for lawyer assistance programs. Depending on where you are, there are lawyer assistance programs in almost every state. A lot of them have support groups, so you can go to a confidential peer support group. So maybe you don't need therapy. Maybe you need to just know you're not the only one experiencing this. So having some of that social support and connection. And, the labs are all free and confidential. So they're a great resource and a great place to find resources in your area.
Awesome. Thank you both for those insights. Our last question for today, and Jill, you kind of touched on the 7-day program that you all have in place, but this person asks, what strategies are effective for creating a personalized well-being menu that are realistic? Would you recommend maybe journaling? What do you think is kind of the best starting place for connecting all those pieces?
I think paying attention to it just like you would anything else. So if you were going to start, an exercise program, like how do you do that? Do you put that into your calendar? Do you make sure, you set intentions for yourself? I'm going to go to an exercise class 3 days a week, or I'm going to take a walk 3 days a week, or, like whatever that looks like. So attending to it and actually scheduling it is the important thing. And also I like to think of like the couch to 5K or couch to half marathon model of like, you don't need to take extreme measures here. You just tiny nudges and just paying attention to it and getting the reps in on a regular basis is really important, and play with it. Like you've got to play with it. You've got to figure out like what works. Oops, that didn't work so well. Okay, how can I figure this out? I was just reading or I was just watching for the 3rd time through Ted Lasso is one of my favorite shows. And I'm a big one for trying stuff and seeing what works. But in the 3rd season, Ted talks about when they're trying to get into this new way of play, which is total football. He talked about when he decided to have the mustache, and that was not his original facial hair. And he was like, sometimes though, and Coach Beard, his colleague, had reflected back to him, like, that does not look good, dude. Like, you cannot do that. And so then he decided to go with the mustache. And he's, his point though was like, having people around you to help support that is important. And it's important to me too. And then also sometimes a great idea is just behind like a couple of iterations that didn't work so well. So like that would also be what I would suggest, is just start to play with it and then, see where it goes from there.
Awesome. I don't have anything to add to that.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for your presentation and your insightful answers to our audience questions. And thank you all so much for submitting your questions. We want to thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. As I mentioned earlier today, we have a great tool to enhance your professional presence without a ton of mental strain, the Justia Lawyer Directory. If you haven't claimed your free profile yet, you can go to lawyers.justia.com to get started. You can get in front of the eyes that matter with millions of monthly visits and powerfully connect to high-value leads. You can even use our Justia AI Bio Enhancer to complete your profile quickly and efficiently while highlighting your expertise. And if you want even more exposure, we have our Justia Premium placements, Platinum for top spots, and Gold to appear above organic listings. So if you're interested in those, you can go to marketing.justia.com. Thank you all so much for joining and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.